My name is Theodore Cottingham. I am a common, simple man in Eureka Springs, Arkansas, this day coming to you to share with you the things of God that are available to you now this day. No matter what your past has been, no matter what religion you are in or what God you have prayed to, the God of light that you really are without flesh on will come and speak with you because you are not separate. And when you begin to know this and open to this and experience this, you will be able to do the things I do, say the things I say, teach like I do? Or are you opening up a whole new world to you that unlimits you from the things of the past? I've been asked, how do I know these things that I teach about? So I speak about this process that I have learned from, where you can experience this process too. You see, even now, there's some 800 videos on YouTube at the moment, and probably a couple thousand that I've never uploaded. And I've written many documents. Like a scribe. I used to say I heard the voice of God in me, but the voice of God is not separate. There are many nuances and distinctions to refining the definitions of God and how God operates to bring you into the process of the new covenant. And when you begin to experience the process of the new covenant, you begin to surrender and experience where you feel an energy. You actually are the one choosing the words to describe what you're feeling. And these words sometimes come more in written form to me, like I'm reading them occasionally, though I'm looking at a camera. Or am I? Is there a camera, if you will, in your mind that you can see through two eyes with, and also within you, to have consciousness of both your present visible empirical world and a consciousness of the Most High, God, whatever you call it, the source of life, the universe? The name doesn't matter really, but let not the name divide us at the moment at all or ever. Let us begin to see this process, because this process is for me and all of you who me will be. These words about the energy of coming into fruition for the completion of the existence of Christ being you. That you no more martyr, that you no more keep yourself from, that you no more hang on a cross, but you anoint with your words. And the word shall anoint you, and you shall anoint it. It's a process where you are kinging the kings, to put it in that vernacular. And as you king the King of Kings, the King of Kings, kings you to be it, crowning you with these words that you come flow to each other. So this is a process. This is the operation of the new covenant. It's not a book. It's not a man. The new covenant, you can say, is a promise. It's a promise, a process. It's a process. I will come teach you. I will write my laws on your mind. But they're really not laws the way we think of rules. The laws of God are God's heart. And the heart of God is for you to see that you are it. Not the blood pumping muscle that's in your chest, but the heart that's between your ears. Your light temple, the temple of light, where you regard it, not something else. The temple of light between your ears is the most holy place. It's the temple not made with hands. And we begin to know things and learn things in ways that we've never known and learned in the past if you will learn me. But I'm speaking of me not in flesh, but me, the consciousness of. So you learn to develop a dual consciousness that is not at war with each other, but it's all one. There's but one God, and we are all it on heaven and earth. Some don't know it. Some don't want it because it's been portrayed as this, that, and the other. It's been given names to divide and conquer each other with. We have destroyed ourselves and each other by teaching the Word of God was in a book. The Word of God was given through one man long ago, and it will never change and it will never come again. That's false. You are the offspring of God, the child of God, that God doesn't want to be ignorant. God is not silent, and you won't be either regarding the words of God when you begin to realize God will interact with you this way. How did I learn these things I've written about the new covenant, and about God being you, me, and women, the divine feminine, the Holy Spirit is? I was willing to learn. I came, I saw, I conquered not, but almost the opposite. I came and bowed down, got on my knees, day after day. I had become a man of prayer. I prayed an hour a day for many years, as was my custom at least. And there were many times I wrote, a sentence, a paragraph that I felt like God was giving me on yellow paper. One day I felt like God spoke to me and said, "You don't value my words." And I began to think about that, and I began to change how I wrote what I thought God was giving me and how I organized it. So instead of little scraps of paper here and there, I began to carry a yellow tablet with me all the time, and a pen. And if I had a thought that just, I had a sense of that, not being the normal way that I think, I would pull out my pen and write it. And so many times what began, if I wrote that phrase that I thought God was giving me, there was another phrase right behind it that came after. And I began to write paragraphs, and sometimes 2 and 3 paragraphs. I had become engaged in a learning system that I didn't know existed, and I didn't even know how it worked. But I knew I was desperate. I wanted to know God, not just about God. I knew God would communicate. Somehow I just knew that. If I let it. So I began. And as I would write, I learned. And my custom was to pray an hour a day. And one day I felt like God asked me, will you give me your mornings? Honestly, when that thought registered with me, I put my hand on my forehead. And at that time, in early 2003, I was afraid to answer because I didn't want to disappoint God. I didn't want to say, yes, sure, and not do it, because the ramifications were enormous. If I began to give God my mornings, and the way that I perceived that was that I would spend my morning. So I did. I started that. I started spending from 8 a.m. to noon. In a church in downtown Tulsa. And after several weeks, I began to realize I couldn't pray. I couldn't address God and flow syllables for 4 hours a day, 5 days a week. I couldn't. So my process to communicate began to kind of fall apart, and I began to just sit there. And at times I would have a thought, maybe a verse in the Bible, maybe a thought about something. I might pull out my pen and write a little bit about it. And then I would just wait. And I never thought about it exactly like I'm about to say this, but I had learned to pray and pour out my heart to what I perceived as God. And as I sat there, those weeks in that chapel from 8 to 12, 4 hours a day, I began to unlearn to pray. I began to take my perception off of prayer and what prayer is. So I didn't pray. I was just there. I was just there with God because I felt like God was everywhere. So after a few weeks, again, I had a phrase. I wrote it on yellow paper. And I wound up writing 3 or 4 pages. I didn't know what to do with it. I reread it. I reread it multiple times. I dated every page, numbered every page, and I valued what was on the pages. And I thought, is this God speaking to me first person like this? Several pages. And a few days later, I did the same thing. And a few days later, the same thing. And then I was doing it every day. And in these messages began to be the revelation of God communicating with me in ways that I had no precedent for. But I was willing to learn. I was willing to spend the time. It changed my income, changed my life, changed everything about my life. You can read between the lines. It changed everything. And I became engaged in a learning system where every day I would go to this place and I would wait, and at some point in time I would begin to write. The teaching was very different. The diction and grammar was different. The instructions to me asked me, and as it asked me, it taught me. There were questions in there for me to answer, and there were questions in there for me to write so that they could be answered in those writings. And it wasn't just linear like we think of reading an article in a magazine, but it was, at times I thought, so discombobulated. It was, something was addressed here and 5 minutes later and 12 minutes later. It was all spread out like a jigsaw puzzle. And afterward I would read it and I would begin to underline certain words or phrases about a subject, and that I'll refer to as, say, that on page 1. And I would realize there was more to that idea on page 1, on page 2, and I would draw a line. I began literally to connect the dots, drawing the lines between the words and phrases of multiple pages that I had written with my own hand. And this is how I began. I began to experience the new covenant education of one. This is a system of education where God reveals God and corrects our ideas of God for us to create and live in the consciousness of God that doesn't create duality. It doesn't create the veil of God being somewhere in the heavens and us being here, a lower caste of. You see, the greatest desire of God is for us to grow up and be it. God is one mind. God is a people. And we are a people now coming out of slavery to our mind and all that we've been taught, that we should endeavor to accomplish all that we've been taught to serve God with, all of that teaching to serve God and be under it, be separate, and go to God when we die, is dematerializing in front of our very eyes if we will experience the new covenant. So that the cameras of our eyes within and our eyeballs in our head understand that time, space, and gravity no longer separate us. We are no longer light years away or here and there. We're one. Are you getting it? So in this process, this was early 2003. There would be many times driving the car back home or to the coffee shop. I had so many questions going through my mind because I had no precedent for this. God teaching me first person every day, writing pages of first person God words. I went to several religious leaders that I respected, and I began to share with them what I was experiencing and some of the words I was writing. That was not a pleasant experience. I was naive. I thought they would be excited. They were infuriated. Asked me who I thought I was to do that. Who did I think I was to come tell them God was talking to me this way when they were this, that, and the other? Several. A lot I could say about that. But what's important now, what I'm communicating to you, is that there is a process. And I'm asking you to let not the people who have hurt you in the past hurt you now. For you are not subject to the words of other people now. You are coming into the authority of your own words if you will learn to engage in the operation of the process of the new covenant me, being you that does this also, that Christ did, that Christ was the process, the revelation of this consciousness where we no longer separate ourselves from God. And we no longer hold as truths so many things that we've been told about time, space, and gravity even, or who we are, or what we can do. I come to you as a simple man. And I'm asking you to come humbly before you and learn to not image God as being afar off. And that you learn to not hold God as something to be sacred and revered and bowed to, for you are learning to bow no more before God to worship it. We are learning to come unto the maturity of the new and living me that God is, our family put back together again. And each one does it individually, and no one can answer for another. You are responsible for you. So I began to write these lessons, these words, these messages day by day. I was very zealous. I knew I had to share them with the world somehow. I couldn't just shut them up. I couldn't put them on a shelf. I had to transmit them. So I had a small business. I had a number of people on my email list. So after I would be at the chapel in the morning and I would write, I would go to my office and type them up and send them out. And I simply subscribed everyone on my email list to receive all these first person words of God. And that was interesting also, because nobody knew what to do with them. They didn't have a frame of reference for what they were receiving. They didn't understand the diction and grammar. They couldn't imagine God was talking to me like this and revealing all this. And so it made for a lot of confusion. But I learned to get an email list that people could opt into and began sharing. Now, I'm sharing this for many reasons. I was asked a day or two ago, how do you know these things? How did you learn these things? This is how I learned. I learned through the words that I wrote. And it wasn't long before, in these messages like this where I wrote, in these recording all of these first person words of God, experiencing this process, I was asked, I was told, bring your laptop so that I can give you more faster. So that was a real challenge to me. So I brought my little laptop and I sat there and waited. And when I began, with the words beginning to flow in me, and I began to type them, it was a real challenge at first, because, wait a minute, I'm looking at the screen to make sure I spell something right. And all of a sudden I realize my hands aren't even the right place on the keyboard. So it's all gobbledygook on the screen. And so there's all of this simultaneous consciousness going on to receive the consciousness of God flowing to me in a stream of energy, of words, the power, the essence in that which transcends words to put words to so you can understand it. So it took me a while, it took me days to figure things out. I had to learn. And so then it wasn't long before I could sit down and if I misspelled a word, I wouldn't worry about it as long as I had my hands on the keys in the right place. So I would be getting the message. I'm sharing all of this with you because you can experience this. And where now we have such great voice transcription, many times as I started writing, and many times in present day words, there's instruction. Begin writing my words longhand, cursively. So many people have forgotten. They hardly write anymore. But writing in English longhand on yellow paper and valuing these things is a transformative process. And this is not just what so many people call journaling. It's not what a lot of people call a stream of consciousness of what you're conscious of. This is the internal flowing of the new covenant that you surrender to begin engaging in to create it, to become what you really are, that which is not limited to flesh. This is the process for you to birth you again. It's a process through the new covenant where you come through your words. For every day when you flow your words like this, you are creating the new you. And you are teaching you. You are connecting the dots too. And this is how I teach me. And I teach who will be blessed by this knot, who I desire to teach, or who will learn to engage in this process. Hence, I have a school. And the school is to become experientially that which you really are, the new covenant you, where you wear the crown of God and you sit in your place of authority over you not, but as you. And you begin your leadership courses with God leading you through them to become the leaders you are to heal the earth and restore heaven here. I said enough, I think, for this one lesson. So you see, in learning to lessonate, that's the term God has given me. When you begin to surrender, to learn, to engage in this process of learning from God directly, you will learn too, much like I did. For that's what I'm given and have been told for years. This is the process of writing the word to be the word, the new covenant. You creating you. Again, this is the regeneration of me. The regeneration of God, regenerating God, the mind of, the consciousness of one. And do the miracles. Well, I stand before you as a simple man, a common guy, a teacher. And I ask you now to begin to enter in this process through my living word that's mine, not possessively, but mine who is ours, the mind of, so that we learn duality no more conquers us. Yin yang will no more be a valid concept, if it was ever. We will learn as we allow ourselves to be the real we are one. So you see, there are many nouns and names. Verbs used differently. Verbs used as nouns and vice versa, and all sorts of things throughout my words. As I began to engage in this process and learn to write day by day what I was experiencing, the first person words of God in this process, even to the extent of the numbering system, the volumes, etc. I was told to name all these things I was writing. I'm so simple, I call it Database 1. And now I understand I was writing my covenant. My covenant is for me. My covenant came through me. My covenant is for you to learn to write yours. And there'll be no book of the law above us, but the covenant of understanding, of engaging experientially the truth of God by being it surrendered to learn at the feet of no other. I'm asking you to be at no other's feet. I'm asking you to wait on God no more. I'm asking you to pray to God no more as you have prayed in the past, like I did, or however is your practice and custom. I am asking you to begin to learn to surrender to the voice of God in you that comes without syllables. It's an energy. It's a sense. It's something for which we know not the exact words to apply. And the face of its origin is the real you. That's not limited to the things we see around us. So let us not be tempted by man's ways to correlate or make congruent everything we see with what comes through us. We're learning how to become the new generation of the regeneration of God. Now, one more thing. The first 2,400 of these lessons that I wrote this way between 2003 and about 2008, that I called Database 1, that I now call my covenant, Theodore's covenant. There's 2,400 lessons in that. They're online, they're searchable, and they are integral to the operation of the School of God. For you will learn many things where it doesn't take you as long to learn them as it took me. I'm asking you to come into an accelerated system of education where you read the words of God, the first person words of God that have come to me through me and exist in Database 1, my covenant, to learn from and learn how to see what is being requested of you for your honor to be restored to you, to walk in the light that knows not the frame of day that we normally think of, light and darkness. You must learn. You must mature. This is not fast food. It's not fast Christianity. It's not fast anything. It's not slow. but it comes by surrender, and it comes by writing and assimilating. Because in this assimilation process, you are assembling you, the one of light. You are creating you in this creation process, because we create by our words the energies of, the influence of God, not, but being it. We are surrendering to crown ourselves in light by the word that no Lord issues over us again. We are not the Lord God's fed by, nor bowing before again, for we are learning the difference between Genesis 1 and Genesis 2. Or are we the creation story? The great allegory of, or are we creating now? The regeneration of me is innumerable, numberless, infinite. And the immortals we are, becoming again, who never die. For the dew of our youth we have, as we become the experience of the new birth, creating the light people us, who are no longer limited to visible empirical earth. The angels are arising now, who were, who are, ignorant no more again. So I ask you to come into the search process, where you're searching for God no more, but you see it is you. And you learn how to receive these words through a learning system that comes from above and not below. Or are we, you see, beginning to grow our consciousness and prune our tree of life that exists between your ears, in your neurons not, or are you, but life eternal? That's the good news for today. Database 1, My Covenant, is searchable online, presently at the website uoflight.org. Well, I've learned this show's backward, but you'll still know. uoflight.org. It exists for the sole purpose at this moment of you being able to simply search it. So what is the value of searching it? It's the value of life itself, life eternal, becoming the newborn, experiencing the new birth, where you're no longer in the shell you called flesh. Or at least you're not limited to it. I love you. And I bless the love of mankind for itself not. But I bless law no more that leads me to death. I lead love to be it. The immortals us are regaining our crown, living humbly, changing nations. The government of one stands now. And I take full responsibility for these words. Or will you now take responsibility for originating yours in the energies of I am, peace, be still no more, but in motion, writing the words. Begin on yellow tablet paper, if you will, if you can. Start where you can. Start where you are. Start this day. Find a little place and be silent, listening for the voice of many ages no more that drowned out the real you. But listen for the real you, the origin of the original you. God in light, love, and peace. Write the words and learn from them. And this is what the School of God is all about. For you to graduate from this school into a new being of light, where you hold on to this body, not again. For we are both and. God and people. God people. The people of God are God. If you love me, you become me. Deny your Godship no more. Love God and be it. My name is Theodore Cottingham in the School of God in Eureka Springs for the moment. I'm still in the School of God. I'm still learning this way. This is how I learn. This is how I know these things that I teach. I have written and become who I am, what I am. And I know who I am. God in two shoes. Christ, a learning system of one, where we deny the failure system to implant its roots in us. Their words will no more conquer us, but God's light will be lit now. And afraid of no one else, listen to the words inside of you. Originate the real you. Believe no other has authority over you anymore. Raise God and be it. The resurrection is of light now stands. I love you all. This is my name, my me. Meons be, the energies of meonics, where the real me is you, God, in place, healing the earth to be heaven again, restored by the authority of ones. I love you all. The School of God in Eureka Springs, Theodore Cottingham. I love you. Good day. Thank you for listening. Thank you for caring for these words. Subscribe to them, please, if you will. Subscribe to life, experience life in ways you've never imagined before. Treat God as someone afar off no more, but be it in your mirror. Be the hands, the legs, the feet, the voice of God restored to you this day in light fashion, where you are one, both and, no longer separate. Good day. Thanks. On the web at theschoolofgod.us.